So today we're going to be taking a look at a scenario where World War II Germany comes into the modern day in 2026. Now obviously this would not be a good thing in real life at all. This was a very expansionist Germany that led to the deaths of millions of people. But putting that aside, what if the country came back in the modern day with its expansionist policies? Well, first of all, they are completely surrounded by NATO countries, meaning that in order for this scenario to happen, we're going to have to assume that NATO has collapsed, which will allow for the actual war scenario to take place. But with that in order, Germany is going to have a lot of areas they can expand into. So if you guys do enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Make sure to check out the channel memberships for early access to each and every one of our videos, as well as access to some members only content. If you didn't see the video on Monday, I highly recommend you check it out. It has a lot of updated information. One of the main points I went over is that there's no longer going to be videos on Mondays just for the sake of me not being burnt out. I went into a lot more detail on that, as well as some Wixo stuff. So once again, if you haven't seen that video, go check it out. But let's go ahead and jump straight into this scenario. So World War II Germany is here and they're back. And this is not a good thing for Europe. Like I said, this country was not a good country at all, responsible for, like I said, millions of deaths and World War II as a whole. But if they did come back, what would they do? Once again, we're going to assume that NATO is no longer here, meaning that this country will be free to attack whoever they want. And I do firmly believe that once this country returned, they would go straight after Austria. Now, I don't plan on this video being a World War II replica. I've done that before, like for an April Fool's video, I think. So this won't necessarily follow the path of how World War II started. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be its own original, unique scenario. But German troops will go ahead and cross over into Austria, and there isn't much contest here. Austria, first of all, they are a neutral country, meaning they don't really have any allies. Of course, they're close with EU countries, but that isn't like militarily. And their military compared to Germany, and not even World War II Germany, is very disadvantaged. Now, I don't know if this World War II Germany has like World War II military power. If it does, that's going to be really troublesome for the rest of Europe. But we're going to say that they inherit the military of modern Germany, and then all this Polish land over here, if there's any military assets in it, then World War II Germany gains control of that. So of course, that means they are going to be stronger than modern Germany, but they are limited by modern Germany in the sense that they can't be as strong as they were in World War II just yet. Anyway, as you can see, Austria has capitulated. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first peace treaty which World War II Germany will draw up. And taking a look at this peace treaty here, we see that World War II Germany will fully annex all of Austria. Yeah, obviously the Anschluss was going to happen here. Now, I don't know if their political motives are the same. Hopefully not, because that would be horrible. But we're going to assume that maybe they want to unite all the German people and not do a genocide. I don't think I need to remind you guys that genocide is bad against any people. I'm only saying that because modernly there's a lot of misinformation or disinformation, and it's led to some really nasty things in political views, which or really shouldn't be welcomed, but we're not going to dive into that because Germany is now invading Slovenia, the land of the Femme, Slovenia. I think the First Lady of the US is from here as well, so that's cool. And Luka Doncic, he's a good basketball player. He's from here as well. Actually, is Melania? She's from Slovakia. Or I think she's from Slovenia. I don't know. I don't care. Anyway, Germany is going to go ahead and fully occupy all of Slovenia. And the reason they invade Slovenia is for access to the Adriatic Sea. This is pretty simple. This is something that Germany actually wanted in World War II in real life. However, of course, Italy took the coastline. They were able to work that out since they were in an alliance together. But here they get it all for themselves. And they will completely annex Slovenia into their country. So a bunch of full annexation so far, but that's to be expected with these smaller countries, especially Slovenia, very tiny. But it now is pretty clear that Germany's goals aren't just to unite German people, it's to make some sensible land gains. Like I said, they have connection to the Mediterranean now. That's good for economic benefits. It's good for trade. Assuming that the countries around Germany might block trade with them, this means that if they want to trade with China, no longer do their vessels have to go all the way around and through the British Channel. Now they can just cut up here through the Adriatic Sea and port over here in Slovenia. Let me know down in the comments, you guys like a more analytical view of things, like what I just showed you with like the trade routes and how it saves Germany some time economically. I feel like diving into reasoning a little bit more might enhance the videos a little bit. I'm trying to change the formula up a little bit in these videos so it's a little bit more, diverse and not just plain and simple, country invades country. But let me know your feedback down below. And also let me know, do you guys want to see more alt history scenarios here on the channel? Most of the content focuses on the modern day, but now I think it's time for us to start digging back in to World War II stuff, World War I stuff, and everything before that. So let me know down in the comments below if that's something you want to see more of here on the channel. But for Germany's next next move, they're going to be declaring war on the nation of Czechia / the Czech Republic. And yes, so far, Germany has been very expansionist, but they do kind of have a reason for doing it, and that's that they want to make a very large center of land over here in Central Europe. They now have their connection to the Adriatic Sea, that's what Austria and Slovenia are for, and now they just want to make their land more connected, because if you want to go from here to here, you got to go all the way around Czechia. What if Czechia just wasn't there? You know, what if we got rid of the road bump? That's what Germany's doing here. Hopefully they're doing it ethically and not ethnically, but Czechia will be wiped out, and we can go ahead and take a look at yet another peace treaty in which Germany is likely to fully annex a country. And fully annex them they do, as Germany has now made themselves into a very large blob here in Central Europe. But at this point in time, Germany's expansion is going to start to slow down and maybe even stop. If they go further and they start to invade more and more countries, it's more and more likely that a coalition will form against them. This is a philosophy that I use a lot in these videos, but it's also a true philosophy. If a country starts to just rapidly expand and annex countries, and especially in Europe if that happens, obviously the community of countries around it are going to come together to put a stop to it. Germany knows that very well from World War II, so they're not going to go ahead and just start attacking other countries. Instead, they're going to focus on themselves, maybe build up their economy, build up their military, and so on and so forth. Now, while that is happening, however, there's going to be a formation of an alliance just east of them. And this alliance will include the nation of Poland, Lithuania, and Slovakia. You could call it the Eastern Bloc, but basically they're forming to stop German expansion into their territory. They all remember World War II, and that expansion is very, very similar to what they saw in World War II up before these countries were all invaded. So yeah, they're going to band together and form an alliance. But interestingly enough, outside of that, Germany is going to form an alliance of their own between themselves and the nation of Hungary. Now, this isn't meant to insult Hungary at all, saying that they would team up with a bunch of fascists or anything. It's just that this country is the most likely to do that of all the nations that border Germany. Also, yeah, this is a part of Germany. I always forget the color in this area. But as you can see, blocs are starting to form in Europe, and it looks like that Europe is heading down a very bipolar, or maybe even tripolar route. What that means is that Germany is considered a bloc. You have the Russians, of course, with their big influence over Eastern Europe. They're a bloc. And then you have the Western nations like the UK, France, Belgium, Netherlands. I think you could probably even throw in the Scandinavian countries in there, and maybe Spain and maybe Portugal, but maybe more Portugal than Spain. It is kind of weird to define Western countries because a lot of countries culturally are very different from each other in Western Europe. But overall, the Western ideology, if you want to call it that, is including all of these nations. Anyway, there's yet another bloc forming officially. And with the increased tensions in Europe caused by the return of World War II Germany, Russia and Belarus will make it official as they form the Neo-Comintern together. Kazakhstan will also be a nation that joins it, and interest will be extended down to nations in the Middle East like Iran. Now, after thinking for a second here, I think we're going to do something new here. I think we're going to have countries that are leaning towards certain alliances. So they won't be considered like official members of the alliance, but they'll be considered partners of the alliance. So like I was just saying, in the case of Russia, Iran might be a nation that is partnered with the Neo-CSTO or whatever I called it, but they aren't officially in the alliance. They're not a part of the military aspect of it. This will also be the case for the Baltic nations up here. They aren't going to be official members of Poland's alliance, but they will be aligned with it. And becoming a partner of Germany's alliance is going to be the nation of Bulgaria. So yeah, Europe is beginning to choose sides here, and notably there hasn't been a formation of a Western bloc yet, which could be very dangerous for a lot of countries, especially down in the Balkans, who want protection from the Western European nations. Like, for example, the country of Croatia. After taking a year or two off from their expansion, the Germans will go ahead and start up the war machine once again as they send their forces down into Croatia, trying to take over more coastal areas along the Adriatic Sea. Of course, this is mostly for an economic benefit, but notably Hungary is also participating in this conflict on the side of Germany, because if they did so, they were promised to get a lot of land from Croatia, a lot of historical Hungarian land, and together Germany and Hungary will go ahead and take down all of Croatia. And we can take a look at another peace treaty where Germany will expand their new empire. And in this treaty here, we see that Croatia is going to be pretty evenly split between the Hungarians and the Germans. Now, of course, the Germans are going to get the more valuable land here because they can use it for economic purposes. Having more ports, of course, is always good for a country. But Hungary is going to get like a lot of the heartland of Croatia, including their capital city. So both countries expand, and their new border is looking something like this. Call it border gore if you want, but just deal with it for now, okay? We're going to deal with it, right? Good. I mean, yeah, it is what it is. Germany has a lot of coast down here. Sure, whatever. It looks bad. I don't care. It does kind of bother me, though. Anyway, with Germany's most recent actions, we're finally going to see the formation of the Western Bloc. And of course, it's going to include exactly who you think it would include, the UK and France. On top of them, we have 2 other countries joining, the Netherlands and Belgium. And of course, there's going to be countries that are partnered with the Western Bloc, including Spain, as well as Portugal, and all the way over here, Greece. So Europe is now full of 4 different blocks: the Eastern Bloc, the German Bloc, the Russian Bloc, and now the Western Bloc. But heading on over to Ukraine, we have a fully declared war between the Neo-CSTO and Ukraine. Of course, this is a conflict that is actually being fought in real life right now, and Russia has a pretty good advance into Ukrainian land, especially over in the Donbass. But here, they are going to fully declare war on Ukraine, and they're also going to bring Belarus as well as Kazakhstan into the war. Now, Iran, the partner, will not be militarily involved, but economically and resource-wise, they might be helping out their allies and might even be sending them equipment. Now, Iran right now is an extremely unstable country. I've almost considered making a video about it, but haven't heard much about it since the big stuff a few weeks ago. I'm assuming it's still going on, and if anything major develops out of it, I'm going to go ahead and, of course, make the video. But maybe we're going to assume that Iran is incredibly unstable and incapable right now. Anyway, back over in Ukraine, with Belarus now in the war, they're going to be able to put a dent into Ukraine's front line, and also considering that NATO is no longer a thing, Ukraine is going to be in a lot of trouble. The Eastern Bloc is not going to allocate their resources to protect Ukraine because they have to protect themselves from Germany. The Germans could have small interest in protecting Ukraine, but really, this is a really far away front line, and the Germans may not be willing to allocate any resources to a war that they know they probably can't win as of now. Outside powers like the US, of course, have demonstrated that they don't really care about Ukraine anymore, which really only leaves the Western Bloc, which they might allocate resources to protecting Ukraine. But without all of NATO involved, it's very unlikely that they would even do that. This basically means that Ukraine is finally on its own, and without significant Western support, they are in some very deep water here. Of course, Europe is facing a new threat. The Germans are back from World War II, and keeping Russian imperialism at bay isn't as big as a priority as it would have been had World War II Germany not returned. So as you saw, Kyiv was taken by Russian forces. They go ahead and link up with Transnistria over here. Ukraine is divided into 2 areas, and the Russians are going to do a very good job at moving in. Most of the Ukrainian population will probably flee into Romania or Poland. In the military, when completely secluded, will either be forced to surrender or will also flee. I would recommend probably fleeing because the Russians have demonstrated that, POWs, sometimes they aren't kept alive. But that's just kind of how war works. Ukraine's guilty of it too. So yeah, Ukraine loses this war without NATO support. And we can take a look at a peace treaty between the Russians, the Belarusians, the Kazakhstans? Dude, what am I talking about right now? The Kazakhs and the Ukrainians. And in this treaty here, we see that Ukraine is going to lose a lot of land. Now, notably, they're not going to be fully annexed by Russia or anything like that. And that's mostly because the rest of Ukraine is going to be made into a puppet state, which, oh god, this looks like shit. I was trying to follow the provinces, and obviously that failed me here. So making a quick little adjustment so it doesn't look like, just the worst thing you've ever seen, Ukraine will be now reduced to just look like this. I do now notice that you can't really see the capital cities or the major cities of the yellow team. So we're going to make them a slightly darker piss color. Like they're kind of dehydrated and they need to drink more water. Anyway, Russia has now gone ahead and achieved their goals that they want to achieve in real life. They've annexed all of eastern Ukraine and they've made the rest of it into an actual Russian puppet state, which is going to go ahead and set them up pretty well to rival any other bloc that wins in Europe. Obviously, the Eastern Bloc is screwed, more likely than not. But the Western Bloc and the German Bloc, those are both very strong alliances, which could rival the Russians. So they're going to sit here and wait. Yeah, I lied. They're not waiting. They're going into the nation of Moldova next. Now, Russia has interest in this nation because of Transnistria, the breakaway province that is literally just a slither on the border of Ukraine. But yeah, Moldova doesn't stand any chance. Maybe Romania would come to their aid, but Romania is probably terrified, so probably not. And yeah, this is probably going to also force Romania into a bloc. But for now, we can take a look at the peace treaty between the Russians and the Moldovans, in which the Moldovan government will simply just be made into a puppet government of Russia, and they're going to go ahead and join the Neo-CSTO bloc. So taking another updated look at the blocks of Europe, it has become very divided here. Now, this seems pretty similar to what I did in a recent video, so I'm sorry if this is similar to that. More so with like there being a bunch of different blocks, but I do think it's pretty fun. But staying in this region, we have the nation of Romania being forced to make a decision. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of expansion all the way around them. Of course, Hungary was involved in the war, We have Ukraine being invaded. Moldova was just invaded. Romania feels like they could be next. So they're going to go ahead and make the decision to fully join a bloc. And the bloc they're going to be joining is the German bloc. So they team up with Hungary and Germany as they feel this is the best option for their continued existence. And honestly, it probably is. Eastern bloc is too weak and the Western bloc is too far away. So yeah, the Germans make the most sense. Sure, they could have joined the Russian bloc, but I don't think that would be within Romania's interests. So this is a very similar situation to what they found themselves in World War II, where they didn't want to be invaded by the Soviets, so they went over and joined the Axis. Of course, that came with a pretty heavy cost, like all of Transylvania. Anyway, back over in Europe, we have Germany finally going ahead and invading yet another nation, so the entire alliance is going to be going to war. Oh god. But the nation they're going to be attacking is the country of Denmark, all the way up here in the Danish peninsula. The reason for their invasion here isn't super straightforward. It's most likely to not just to get more land, but there also is some benefits, being the entrance into the Baltic Sea. You can try to control that, although Sweden also has some land that is a part of the entrance. But there's this island out here which could be used for military purposes. And you also have to factor in the territory of Greenland, which has a lot of oil in it, which could be used for the Germans. So all of the Danish peninsula is now occupied. We can go ahead and take a look at Greenland. Oh, yeah, well, go figure. The Americans beat the Germans to it. They're already all the way up in Greenland, and they're completely occupying it. And no, the Americans aren't fighting on the same team as World War II Germany, but I wouldn't necessarily put it past the current government. They've been doing a lot of expansionist things. But yeah, unfortunately for Germany, they will not have any access to Greenland, as that will now be a part of the nation that is known as the United States. They do get the Faroe Islands though, so that's cool, I guess. Anyway, in this treaty here, we see that Denmark will be fully annexed by World War II Germany. Now, noticeably here, World War II Germany hasn't been super aggressive and expansionist. Like in real life, World War II Germany, they would have already been in Paris by now, but this one seems a little bit more docile. And that's likely due to the fact that there are a lot more countries in Europe this time around, and there are a lot more powerful countries in Europe this time around. Of course, the UK and France are both top 10 military powers. Russia is a top 10 military power. Turkey's really strong. Italy's super strong. Anyway, Luxembourg is gone. They're a part of Germany. Goodbye, Luxembourg. Everyone wave goodbye. It was nice knowing you. I'm sure you guys didn't even notice it was there. Like, I colored in the Netherlands and Belgium. I didn't color them in, though, because I thought Germany would invade them. You forgot about Luxembourg. Let's be honest, you forgot. How could you? There's, like, a lot of people in Luxembourg. They're offended. If you're from Luxembourg, let me know down in the comments below. You guys also forget about Liechtenstein? Yeah, they got annexed a while ago. Anyway, moving on up north here, we see that with the annexation of Denmark by the Germans, we have the formation of another bloc. This time, it's between all of the Nordic countries, Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Iceland. These countries come together to put a stop to any kind of expansion into their territories, which means that Europe is even more filled up now with alliances. However, with that in mind, we now have to acknowledge that these alliances are more likely than not about to start clashing. Also, over in the Baltics, we have Latvia officially joining in on the Eastern Bloc, while Estonia will go ahead and make the interesting decision to flip over and join the Nordic bloc instead. So they leave the Eastern Alliance. They feel like this thing is screwed, and honestly it is. So they go ahead and pair up with their buddy Finland and Sweden and Norway. Also, talking about a few countries that are going to be joining some partnerships with alliances. Serbia will join in on the Russian partnership. Albania will join up the partnership with the West, as well as Kosovo and North Macedonia. Remember, these guys are not officially allies with each other, of course. Albania and Greece would not get along, and neither would North Macedonia and Greece. But don't worry, they're not aligned with each other. They're aligned with the Western countries. Not militarily, but in all other assets they are. This really only leaves Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Montenegro, as unaligned countries in the Balkans. And then Italy, of course, is also neutral at this point. But everyone else in Europe has a side. Oh, other than Ireland, but why would they join a side? They're all the way over here. Anyway, the Eastern Alliance here, they're getting invaded. And to be a little bit more specific, they're being invaded by the German bloc. So Hungary, Romania, and Germany will all declare war on Poland, which also brings Slovakia, Lithuania, and Latvia into the war. This is going to go as good as you guys would expect. The Hungarians and the Romanians will primarily focus on Slovakia, and well, Hungary and Romania versus Slovakia goes well for them 9 times out of 10, actually 10 times out of 10. I don't think there's a world where Slovakia wins that matchup. Now, Poland versus World War II Germany, we already know how that goes. But in the modern day, Poland's a little bit stronger than they were back then, but still, it isn't going to go exactly well for the Polish here. And even with extra allies in Lithuania and Latvia, it doesn't really change the tide of the war. Sure, they might take a little bit of land out of Kaliningrad or Königsberg. think is what it was called. But in comparison to the main front line between the Germans and the Polish, yeah, that doesn't really matter. The Hungarians, as well as the Romanians, will not come up from the south. They'll take over Krakow. At least I think that's where that is. I don't know. I could be wrong. And the Germans will go ahead and march straight into Warsaw and take it without much problem at all. They'll go ahead and march all the way over to the border between them and Belarus. They'll kick all of the Baltics out of Königsberg, and they'll start their invasion into Lithuania. At this point, however, unfortunately for Germany, the Russian bloc will be involved in the war, as the Russians seek to expand their access to the Baltic Sea. It's a little bit too cold up here for all that. So they'll now aim for annexation of Latvia and a little bit of Lithuania in order to fulfill that goal of theirs. They'll meet up with German troops on the front line, they'll have a standoff, and they'll be hostile, but no fire will be exchanged because neither side wants to fight each other as of right now. They will go ahead and agree to have a peace treaty down in the nation of Italy, more specifically, the Treaty of San Marino. And in this treaty here, we see that the Eastern Bloc is completely destroyed. The Germans and the Russians go ahead and annex a ton of countries, and we'll start with the Germans. First of all, Poland does still exist, however, they are now made into a puppet state of Germany, and they are forced to join the German bloc. A good chunk of Lithuania is now German as well. And down south, we have Slovakia being fully annexed by the Hungarians. Up north, we have Russia annexing all of Latvia, as well as a good portion of Lithuania, and then we have Belarus also getting a good portion of Lithuania, including Vilnius. So really, both blocks are enhanced here. They get a lot more land and a lot more strength, but also notably, the border between both blocks, being the German and the Russian, is now very extensive as it splits across Europe. So, if there's any hostilities between the two blocks, things could go down. Notably, Bulgaria will now fully join in on the German bloc, as well, interestingly enough, the nation of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So the German bloc really has expanded to include pretty much all of Central Europe and a lot of the Northern Balkans, but obviously expansion into Western Europe and expansion into Southern Europe is extremely unlikely for this bloc, as, of course, the Western nations don't like the idea of World War II Germany, and the Swiss and the Italians are very neutral at this point. Talking about the Western Bloc real quick, they're going to have a few countries that are going to officially join in on the military alliance. The first nation to join will be Greece, and this is a very big pickup for them. Greece has a pretty strong military, a lot of manpower in their military, which is very good for the Western Alliance, as they want to have a good, strong, influential area down here in the Southern Balkans, all the way over in Eastern Europe, of course. Now, this is probably going to block all three of these other nations from being able to join. So Albania, obviously the Greeks would block that. They would also block the North Macedonians, and Greece doesn't even recognize Kosovo, so they would block them as well. But the power of Greece is a lot better than the power of all three of these nations, and obviously the Western nations will prioritize that, of course. But also they're adding Spain into their military alliance. Of course, Spain has a pretty good military as well, so the Western Bloc will be a lot more powerful now, which is going to be very useful as World War III, essentially, is going to break out over here. Hey, so, funny story. For the first time ever, in the 6 years that I've used the mapping program that I have, it crashed, and the map is gone. That's never happened before, ever. And the 5 years that I've done mapping, I've never had the application crash, and I've never lost a map. But, for some reason, it decided to crash today. So, that really sucks, and I'm really sorry. I could, go in and redo the whole thing. I don't want to, though. And if you guys watched the Monday video, you know why. I'm sorry. So instead of doing that and taking the next hour to redraw the entire map and all the colors and stuff, I'm going to tell you what I had planned to happen on a map. Just not the same map. Yeah, like I said, that's never happened before. I don't know why that happened, and I'm really sorry if you were excited for that ending. I was too. I was having a lot of fun with the video, but I guess Paint had other plans. Anyway, what was going to happen was I was going to zoom out and show you a full map of all of the blocks in the world. There was an American bloc that had formed, there was a Chinese bloc that had formed, and basically it just included all those countries' allies. So the US bloc had them, of course, with Greenland, which they annexed from the war. They also had El Salvador, Argentina, and Israel in their bloc. And then China had a bloc of their own that included Pakistan, Laos, Cambodia, and then they had, I think, Kyrgyzstan in their bloc as well, and Afghanistan. Not fully as like allies, but as like partner countries, most of them. I think it was mostly just between China and Pakistan. The rest were partners. Russia's bloc had expanded greatly. They had India as a partner, North Korea, all of Central Asia other than Kyrgyzstan. Australia and New Zealand had actually officially joined the Western Bloc. And yeah, there was a few other countries, but that wasn't important. The big war that was about to happen was basically the Russians were going to attack the Nordic bloc, and they were going to start to invade Finland and Estonia. With that happening, the German bloc was actually not going to join the war on the side of Russians against the Nordics, but they were going to join the war against the Russians and begin to invade into the Russian bloc. Now, that was going to be a very bad thing for the Russian bloc because obviously the Nordics and the Germans together could probably overwhelm the Russians. But as the war fought on, and right before the Germans were able to take Moscow, we have the Western Bloc joining the war and starting to invade into the German bloc from the west. This would have caught the Germans off guard completely. They would be forced to retreat a lot of their forces, leading to the Russians being able to take back a lot of land. The Germans might be able to clash up against the Westerners for a little bit, but eventually the Russians would sign an armistice with the Scandinavian countries, going ahead and bringing them out of that war, allowing them to fully focus on the war against the Germans. It's the West and the Russians versus the Germans, kind of like an echo to World War II. And in the end, the Russians are able to capture Berlin, and the Westerners also take over a bunch of land, ending World War II Germany and their bloc officially. I really wish I could have shown you that normally as a mapping scenario. It was going to be a lot of fun. However, once again, for the first time ever, like I kid you not, the program has never done that before. I don't know why it happened now. It's never happened before. I have never had an issue with it. It's been pristine and perfect the 5 years that I've used it. But I guess just for this video, it decided to crash. So, yeah, and honestly, I don't save it because, once again, that's never happened before, so I would have never thought to save it because I didn't think the program could crash, but here we are. But yeah, I really wish I could have mapped that out. I mean, maybe I could do the peace treaty real quick. And I kid you not, it would probably look something just like this. Basically, a repeat of what happened in World War II, a Western alliance and a Russian bloc. Now, this isn't as detailed as what the real treaty would have looked like, of course, but once again, I can't redraw it because it's gone. Anyway, though, that is going to do it for today's video. I'm so sorry that happened. It's really unfortunate. But yeah, nothing much I can do. If you guys did enjoy, though, make sure to leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let me know down in the comments, are you enjoying the kind of videos that are, like I said, a little bit more analytic, a little bit more like block-faced, like you saw the Western bloc, the Russian bloc, etc. I think that kind of stuff is a lot more interesting in the modern sense than what I usually do, which is not that. Because realistically, that does happen. And while they aren't like official military alliances in real life, they do still exist, and they're just simply referred to as like boundaries of influence. But with the U.S. making its kind of departure from European politics, you can see more and more blocks like this starting to form. Granted, though, all of Europe is really united right now, and I don't think they would splinter into a bunch of different blocks, but it's fun to imagine that maybe if something like World War II Germany were to come back, of course, not that because it couldn't come back, but something in another form were to happen and split it all up, it would be fun to dive into what exactly that would look like. But yeah, once again, that is going to do it for today's video. Make sure to show some support, check out channel memberships, all that good stuff. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. And of course, thank you to all our super fans. This includes Police Wojak, Voice and Hayes, Mr. Sabotage, Holly W, Gil Martinez, Lizo, Upgraded Bro, Captain Rex, Stuff, The Quiet Observer, CBB Jr., Vista, Truno Apex, Xlendy, Terminator, Cooper FN, Chaco Fur, Agisto, CTG on YT, Acheron, Other Coda, Shifty Mapping, H3C, J5W, W4M, Jazzy Jerboa, Nevada Garbage Trucks, I Have History Official, Ozgeo, A Norwegian, Zayland, DJ, Big Goose, Laser Taze, Pablo Sigma Cat, and Hammer Toad 45. Once again, thank you guys.